The story of Sultan al-Mu'ayyad Shaykh al-Mahmudi does not begin in a palace. It actually begins in the Caucasus Mountains, far from the grand city of Cairo that he would one day rule. He was born around the year 1369. As a young boy, maybe only 10 or 12 years old, his life changed forever. He was captured and sold into slavery. This was, well, a common path for many boys in that region. They were bought by slave traders who saw their potential. These boys were destined to become Mamluks, which means owned in Arabic. They were brought to the heart of the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt, a world completely different from the one they knew. Upon arriving in Cairo, the young boy, now known simply as Shaykh, was purchased by the powerful Sultan Barkuk. This was honestly a stroke of luck. Being part of the Sultan's household meant he would receive the best training possible. He learned to be a soldier. He studied the arts of war, horsemanship, and archery. He was also taught about religion and how to read and write. This education was not just about fighting, it was about creating a loyal and skilled elite. Shaykh was no longer just a slave. He was part of a military brotherhood, a system that could lead a man from bondage to the highest positions of power. He was clever and strong, and his superiors began to notice him. Life as a Mamluk was demanding and full of discipline. Shaykh grew up in the barracks of the Cairo citadel, the center of Mamluk power. He trained every day with other young men who shared his background. They were all foreigners, torn from their homes, and their loyalty was to the Sultan and to each other. This created a unique bond among them. Shaykh proved himself to be an excellent soldier and a natural leader. He rose through the ranks because of his skill and his intelligence. Sultan Barkuk recognized his talents and eventually granted him his freedom. He was then appointed as an Amir or commander, which was a significant step on his path. His early years were not just about military training. He was also learning about the complex world of Mamluk politics. He watched how powerful amirs plotted against each other. He saw how sultans were made and unmade. This was a dangerous world of shifting allegiances and sudden betrayals. Shaykh learned to be cautious and to choose his allies wisely. He understood that to survive and to thrive, he needed more than just strength in battle. He needed to be a clever political player. His time as a slave and a soldier in the citadel was honestly the perfect school for the challenges that lay ahead of him. It prepared him for a future he could have never imagined. The death of Sultan Barkuk in 1399 created a power vacuum in Cairo. His young son, Faraj, became the new Sultan. This period was marked by great instability. The powerful Mamluk emirs fought among themselves for control over the young ruler. Shaykh, now a respected and influential Amir, found himself at the center of these conflicts. He was appointed as the governor of Tripoli in Syria, which was a very important post. But his ambition was greater. He saw the weakness in Cairo and knew that an opportunity was coming. He began to build his own power base, making alliances with other amirs who were also unhappy with the situation. His journey to the throne was filled with danger and setbacks. At one point, he was arrested by his rivals and thrown into a terrible prison in Cairo. This prison was located next to one of the city gates, Bab Zuwayla. The conditions were awful. He suffered greatly and vowed that if he ever came to power, he would tear down the prison and build a beautiful religious institution in its place. This experience did not break his spirit, it made him more determined. He managed to escape his confinement and rallied his supporters. He was a skilled military strategist, and he engaged in a long and difficult civil war against Sultan Faraj and his allies. The struggle for Cairo was long and bloody. The city's streets became battlegrounds as different Mamluk factions fought for supremacy. Shaykh was a relentless commander. He led his forces with courage and a clear vision of his goal, the Sultanate. He had to navigate a web of betrayals and temporary alliances. A friend one day could be an enemy the next. Finally, after years of fighting, his moment came. In 1412, he successfully defeated Sultan Faraj's forces. He captured the Sultan and, with the support of other leading emirs and religious scholars, had him deposed and executed. Shaykh had finally reached the pinnacle of Mamluk society. On November 6, 1412, Shaykh al-Mahmudi was proclaimed the new Sultan. He took the royal title al-Malik al-Mu'ayyad, which means the supported king, a name suggesting he was supported by God. The slave boy from the Caucasus was now the absolute ruler of a vast empire that stretched from Egypt to Syria. His ascent was a classic Mamluk story. It showed that in this unique system, a man's origins did not have to determine his destiny. Through strength, ambition and political skill, even a slave could rise to sit on the most powerful throne in the Islamic world. His reign had begun, but he would soon find that ruling was even harder than winning the throne. Sultan al-Mu'ayyad Shaykh's reign, which lasted from 1412 to 1421, was not a peaceful one. He inherited an empire that was in deep trouble. The years of civil war had destroyed the economy. The plague, known as the Black Death, had returned several times, killing a huge portion of the population. This meant there were fewer farmers to grow food and fewer artisans to produce goods. The value of the currency was unstable, and prices for everyday items were very high. One of his first and most difficult tasks was to bring stability back to the empire. He had to restore order and find ways to make the economy work again. He also faced constant threats from outside his borders. Rival Turkmen principalities in Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, were challenging Mamluk authority in northern Syria. These were not easy enemies to defeat. Sultan al-Mu'ayyad had to lead several military campaigns to secure his empire's frontiers. He was an experienced general and personally led his army into battle, which was a great morale booster for his troops. These campaigns were expensive and took him away from Cairo for long periods, but they were necessary to protect his lands and show his strength as a ruler. He successfully reasserted Mamluk dominance in the region, proving he was as capable on the battlefield as a sultan as he had been as an emir. Back in Cairo, the Sultan had to manage the powerful Mamluk emirs who had helped him gain power. These men were ambitious and could easily turn against him, just as he had turned against the previous Sultan. He had to be both generous and firm. He rewarded his loyal supporters with land and high positions in the government. At the same time, he did not hesitate to remove or imprison anyone he saw as a threat. This constant political maneuvering was a key part of being a Mamluk Sultan. He also implemented financial reforms to try and stabilize the currency and control inflation, though with limited success due to the deep economic problems. Despite these many challenges, Sultan al-Mu'ayyad's rule is remembered for its major achievements. He was a great patron of architecture and a pious man. He wanted to leave his mark on Cairo, not just as a warrior, but as a builder and a man of faith. He used his wealth and power to commission one of the most magnificent religious complexes the city had ever seen. This project would become his greatest legacy. It was a way to thank God for his success, to serve the people of Cairo, and to ensure that his name, the name of a former slave, would be remembered for centuries to come. The most visible and lasting achievement of Sultan al-Mu'ayyad Shaykh's reign is his Grand Mosque. He did not forget the vow he made while suffering in the dreadful prison near Bab Zuwayla. Soon after becoming Sultan, he ordered the demolition of the prison. In its place, he began the construction of a magnificent complex. This was not just a mosque for prayer. It was planned to be a full religious institution, including a madrasa for teaching the 4 schools of Islamic law, a library, and a mausoleum where he would be buried. The project began in 1415 and took several years to complete, consuming a vast amount of resources and the finest craftsmanship available. The construction of the mosque was an enormous undertaking. The Sultan was personally involved in every detail. He wanted it to be the most beautiful building of its time. To achieve this, he brought in the best architects and artisans. He also took materials from other older buildings, which was a common practice. Famously, he acquired a spectacular bronze door and a beautiful candlestick from the Mosque Madrasa of Sultan Hassan. The new mosque was built right next to the famous gate of Bab Zuwayla, and its 2 minarets were cleverly built on top of the gate's existing towers, creating a unique and iconic skyline that is still famous today. The Mosque of Al-Mu'ayyad was celebrated for its beauty and grandeur from the moment it was completed. Its prayer hall is a vast space filled with light, with beautiful marble floors and intricately decorated walls and ceilings. It was a center for religious life and learning in Cairo. The Sultan filled its library with valuable books and appointed the most respected scholars to teach in its madrasas. For the people of Cairo, the mosque was a symbol of the Sultan's piety and his power. It transformed a site of misery and imprisonment into a place of beauty, worship, and education. It was a powerful statement about his journey from suffering to glory. Sultan al-Mu'ayyad Shaykh died in 1421 and was buried in the mausoleum attached to his mosque, as he had planned. His story is a powerful reminder of the extraordinary nature of the Mamluk system. He was a man who experienced the lowest lows and the highest highs. He was a slave, a prisoner, a general, and finally, a great sultan. While his reign was filled with war and economic hardship, his legacy is cemented in the stones of his magnificent mosque. Today, when you stand at Bab Zuwayla and look up at the minarets of the Mosque of Al-Mu'ayyad, you are looking at the final chapter of an incredible story. The story of a slave who became a king and left an enduring mark on the city he ruled.